is Mr. Peoples here, and before we start the webcast, I'd like to begin with a joke. So here it goes. Why do elephants wear tennies? Give up? Well, elephants wear tennies because 11sies are too big and 9sies are too small. All right, let's get started for today. We're going to be talking about Reconstruction, and Reconstruction is a period of time in American history. Let's try that again. Is a period in American history from 1865 to 1877, and this 12-year period is when the United States is trying to mend the wounds from the Civil War, trying to come back together and create one country again. And so there's all kinds of struggles that go on during this time period, as well as African Americans gain their freedom, then they lose it. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff here in the next few minutes. Let's start, though, with our learning targets for this particular section. And we're waiting for it to come up here. Here we go. Our learning targets for this section is that you can explain important events and concepts from the Reconstruction period. We're going to focus in this first part about we're going to focus on Reconstruction plans. There was a plan by Abraham Lincoln called the 10% Plan, and then a alternative plan called the Wade-Davis Bill. Your goal is to know the difference between the two. We're going to talk about black codes and what they were. And we're going to talk about the 13th Amendment and what it did. So let's start with first a definition. Reconstruction is the process of putting the country back together after the Civil War. The Civil War ends, 620,000 Americans are killed. There are hard feelings amongst the North and the South after the Civil War. President Lincoln has been assassinated, and the country is going through this period of trying to put itself back together. And this period is known as Reconstruction. Most historians believe they agree that it lasted about 12 years, and but it takes even longer than that for the country to be completely healed. And so we're going to talk about those 12 years specifically, that 12 years known as Reconstruction. I want to start with this picture. This picture became kind of an anthem for abolitionists, the people that were trying to end slavery. And this picture was usually on their flyers that they had, as well as they made tokens and medallions out of this. And I put this picture on here to represent the time period before the Civil War for African Americans, a time period when they were in slavery, when they were in chains. And then the Civil War happens, and the Civil War was very bloody, very deadly, but at the end of the Civil War, slavery ends, and African Americans actually gain this gift of freedom that they had been fighting for and others had been fighting for years. And for a while there, African Americans do gain some of those freedoms, but then very quickly, almost faster than it came about, that freedom was taken away. And so keep that in mind as we talk about this Reconstruction period, because it is very important to know, because it's going to shape the things that we talk about for the rest of the school year. This idea of being given a taste of that freedom and then having that gift, that freedom taken away. All right, let's talk about Reconstruction. As the Civil War was ending, when Abraham Lincoln was reelected in November of 1864, he could see after his reelection that the Union was eventually going to win the war. And so he goes about creating a plan for reconstructing the United States. And Lincoln's plan became known as the 10% Plan. And I'll explain why here in a moment. Part of his plan was that all of the southern states, in order to come back into the United States, all of the southern states had to ban slavery. Okay? Another part of Lincoln's plan was that Southerners had to swear a loyalty to the United States. They had to swear an allegiance to the United States. And under Lincoln's plan, only 10% of the voters needed to have this loyalty oath. Once 10% of the voters did this, new state governments could be created. Okay, so if let's say there was a state that had 100 people. Oops, we'll go back here. Let's say that there was a state that had 100 people, and that state, under Lincoln's plan, with 100 people, would only need 10% of those 100 voters. Well, 10% of 100 is equal to 10 voters. Okay? So under Lincoln's plan, this fictional state of 100 people, or 100 voters, would have to, 10 people would have to swear loyalty to the Union, and they could come back into the United States. That was very easy for the Confederates and for the Southerners. Lincoln wanted to put things back together quickly and to have and allow some forgiveness for those Southern states. However, there were people that disagreed with him. And those people were some of the people in Congress, the lawmakers. Matter of fact, two congressmen, Congressman Wade and Congressman Davis, proposed a bill that becomes known as the Wade-Davis bill. And the Wade-Davis bill has very similar things to the 10% plan, but ultimately it's more harsh to the South. Just like in Lincoln's plan, the Wade-Davis bill had to ban slavery. Just like in Lincoln's plan, Southerners had to swear loyalty to the United States. But here's where it becomes more harsh. The Wade-Davis bill says that a majority of voters needed to swear loyalty to the United States. And so what that means, in that same state where we had 100 voters, under the Wade-Davis bill, 51 of those voters had to swear loyalty to the United States. That's 41 more than, say, that under Lincoln's plan. So that made it more difficult for the Confederates to come back into the Union. And on top of that, only people who didn't support the Confederacy would be allowed to be in the government. So people like Jefferson Davis, people like lawmakers who supported the Confederacy, they were not allowed to be a part of government under the Wade-Davis bill. This was much more harsh than Lincoln wanted, and that's why Lincoln did not support this bill when it came through Congress. Okay? Unfortunately, Lincoln is assassinated in April of 1865, and so he never gets to see his plan put in place, and he never gets to see the 13th Amendment ratified. The 13th Amendment ends slavery in the United States, and this amendment to the Constitution gave African Americans new freedoms. But that didn't mean everything was all hunky-dory for African Americans. Problems still existed for African Americans. For one, African Americans didn't own any land. The land that they had been living on most of their life and working on most of life was somebody else's. And so even though they were now free to go where they wanted, they didn't have any land to farm. They didn't have any way to earn a living or to make any money. Another problem that existed for African Americans is many of them were uneducated. And so the government creates a group known as the Freedmen's Bureau to try and build schools and things in the South to help African Americans become educated. But that lack of education is a problem that exists just as slavery ends. And then, of course, there's still discrimination. Even though slavery is over, even though the Civil War allowed the 13th Amendment to be passed, there are still a lot of whites in America who do not see African Americans as equals. And so therefore there's still this discrimination that is around in the United States. Okay? So just because the slavery has ended, in some ways that's positive for African Americans, but in others there's still some problems that exist. One of those problems that exists is in the southern states. The southern states begin creating these laws called black codes. And these laws were specifically to limit the freedoms of African Americans. basically these southern governments were trying to create a system where there was a legalized form of slavery, but not calling it slavery. They were just hiding it behind these outrageous laws that they would have in the South. And we're going to talk about some of those black codes in class, and you'll actually see some examples of those in class. Now, these black codes angered many congressmen, and Congress wanted to take over Reconstruction. Okay, and the reason they wanted to take over Reconstruction is because the new president, President Johnson, they didn't believe that he was doing his job correctly, and we're going to talk about that in the next part of this video cast.